But, you know, interesting, the whole topic of technology dependence. And look at me. I'm kind of, my hands feel tied, you know, and 20 years later of running Turnkey, can I do everything for everybody? No, that's changed. I have a lot of customers that still expect that. But, you know, the little bitty things are like, gosh, let me go, is there anybody I can go grab? So it's kind of funny. But we do have a huge dependence on technology. So as we talk about this theme, though, there's a lot of relationship here that, as we talk about dependencies on that. So let's talk about cloud concepts. Public cloud. What is public cloud? Okay, and I mentioned private cloud. You know, public cloud, multi-tenant, I say non-dedicated resources, resource pooling, self-service, elasticity, can shrink, can grow, pay by use, Microsoft CRM Online, Office 365. I should put Azure in there, Google. They consider themselves public. I don't know if you've ever looked at what data centers look like. I've got a client that had 40 acres in Phoenix with black fiber and 16 megawatts sitting on his property. He says, Chris, I want to build a data center. Well, I did a lot of research. These are millions of square foot facilities. I mean, these aren't little rooms with a couple of racks in here. We're talking public cloud is immense. It's enormous. And globally, if you look at Microsoft, they're in Ireland. What do they have in Ireland? Several million square feet. Google, Amazon. I mean, if you look at, so public cloud is massive. It is just, you can't even imagine the scope of what they're doing. Private, why private? Public is not all things to all people. It's about offering. It's about what can I buy, where can I buy it, choices. Okay, so private, my example, commercial facility, downtown St. Louis. Who owns Xilinx was bought by, was it, whatever, they were bought. They were acquired by even a bigger party, but commercial facility, privately owned equipment, policy, we still strive for compliance, SOC compliance, because people are still measuring benefits. Hybrid. Hybrid's a term again. What's hybrid mean? Well, I have a little here, a little here, a little here. Well, that's okay too. It's not an all or none. So understanding public, private, hybrid, on-premise. You hear that? What is on-premise? Most companies have on-premise servers. The historical, the legacy is we buy our equipment, we put it in our building, we install our stuff there, we maintain it. Maybe somebody comes in and maintains it, but that's what on-premise means. It means it's typically in your facility. Hosting. Terminology. What's it mean? When somebody's hosting for you, typically means it's rented. It means you don't own it. Okay? What don't you own? Well, a lot of variability in what you can host and what you own, but there are places where I don't own any equipment, but I'm putting my applications. Okay, well, I don't own the equipment, but I own the applications. Maybe I don't own the equipment and I don't own the application. So it could be a mix again. I own some of it, I rent some of it, I rent all of it. Okay, co-location. Well, now here we go, company-owned servers. Okay, I'm going to take my stuff and put it in your building. Okay, so my relationship with my hosting facility is co-location. I put my equipment, my licenses in another facility. Maintained in a hosting facility, managed services. But I don't have to do all the service. So what did I gain? I gained some efficiencies of a facility. It's my capital. I'm not renting it. But now I'm using their personnel, 7 by 24, et cetera, et cetera. So big differences between the concepts of hosting and co-location. A lot of companies are doing co-location. They're not putting their stuff on somebody else's equipment. They own the equipment. They own the software. This doesn't belong in your building. Okay, so that's kind of that rationale as we kind of talk through that. In SaaS, I'm missing an A. It is actually software as a service. So what that means is we're not buying capital. Okay, we're buying its expense. I can go out and buy anything I need. I can rent it. I can rent it for a while. I can shrink it. I can grow it. But again, as we're just talking about terminology, public, private, hybrid, on-premise, hosting versus co-location. Very important is you talk about, well, what do I want to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Why cloud? I love this one. This is my office building somewhere out here. Did it happen again? Mm-hmm. You know where my stuff's at? In the data center. So, you know, I would be upset if the building got wet. I would be upset if somebody backed up a pickup truck. They'd probably be upset not to find any servers in my office and not to find very much there. They'd say, oh, where's this stuff? My stuff is gone. So this is an example of why do we do that? It used to be the one, let's move to higher ground. But why cloud? Why would we host? Okay, why? What's our core competency? I ask people that all the time. What are we good at? what's our business do? Okay? Even I ask that question about my organization. What should we be doing? What business are we in? You know, it's like a client says, I don't need you to implement GP. I'm going to implement it. Really? That's not what you do. You run an e-commerce company, for example. But you're going to, okay, but knowing what we're good at. And so as we think about why cloud, that's part of the strategy too. What am I good at? You know, and how do I buy services? And so the first one that I have is I have physical security. I love that. And again, as we're business owners, business executives, and managers, we think about where does my stuff live? And is physical security a concern? Okay, if I had $500,000 in gear in Chesterfield Valley, and somebody backed up a truck and pulled my rack out of there and it's gone, that's physical security. Somebody could physically come in and take my gear and go with it. Okay, so what's a data center? What's a hosted installation? You can't steal my stuff. You can't. Okay, well, it's not just you can't, nobody can. And if you had to get into the facility where my stuff's at, boy, you got to do retinal IDs, you're scanning, you're trying to even get close to it. There's no way you get it out of there. Where's your stuff? Public cloud, private cloud, security. You can't steal the stuff, okay? So now you're thinking data, can people steal data? Like I said, that's a whole different discussion, but redundancy of key resources is another big one. Why do I do this? High availability is the word, okay? What's it cost me to be without my business system? I lose my email. What's mail cost you an hour for your entire company? We take it for granted, but we can compute that. So power and internet are big ones, okay? And even when you host, great, all my stuff's downtown. Well, what am I worried about in Chesterfield? I'm still worried about power and internet, but if we lose power and internet in Chesterfield Valley, we can go to Bread Company. We can all work. We can all go to my house. We can all work because our stuff is someplace where it has the technology, dual substation feeds. Can't just have one power grid. You got to have two. Can't just have one internet. Can't just have two. We've got three. Holy cow. HVAC, redundant HVAC. What else? Fire suppression. Redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. And the reason that you host is because there's a tipping point where, God, do I have to buy all this in my office and then every 3 years I got to replace it? How much does it cost to run? Great idea. High availability of IT resources. So again, do I want to hire an IT guy that's going to charge me $90,000, $100,000 a year and he's babysitting my gear? Do I need him all the time? What's he doing? Can I outsource that? So now we're back to who's watching the store, okay? I pay somebody 7x24 to watch my stuff. Why? Because nobody on Turnkey wants to work 7x24. I don't want to staff second shift, third shift, Saturdays, Sundays. I don't do that. That's not what I do. So even me, I outsource that. 7x24 outsource services. Managed expense, okay? Predictability. You know, if you costed it correctly, you find out that there's great value in hosting. A lot of people don't really do the math. They go, oh, it's cheaper for me to do it. Is it? Well, let's do the numbers again. But a managed expense. Typically, we get good predictability on that. The zero hops to the internet, it's true. We sit right next to a 14-foot internet water pipe. I mean, it is fast. It is. There's no latency. So again, the zero hops is a big deal as we look at where do we put the equipment. Cost to maintain servers, licensing, etc. Again, we know that this is a repeatable capital expense. You know, equipment's going to fail. We've got legacy. We've got obsolescence. How do we deal with this? A lot of things. You know, the no IT hostage scenarios is kind of a funny one that I have where we talked about fiefdoms in one of the user groups where how many IT people could you all leave for a minute? But there's a lot of business owners that are scared to death that the IT is going to sabotage the company if I better be careful because my IT, I work for them. You know, we laugh about that. Bruce is IT here. He's like, that's why I said IT, you walk out of the room. But legitimately, the business owner puts his stuff in a data center. Who controls it? He does, because he's the guy paying the hosting provider. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm accountable to the business owner. So, you know, your local IT guy, if you've given him rights, but I'll tell you what, you know, this is a real strategy here that a lot of people want that independence. They want to be able to make business decisions and have them as business decisions, not necessarily an IT decision. And IT influences things, don't get me wrong, and I'm not undercutting it. We're in IT. But as we look at rationale and why do we consider these things, and this is a big one too. I got to read my license. Oh, how much is it going to cost to get a new copy of Office for 350 people? You're like, oh, isn't there a cheaper way? Sure. So again, why cloud? Again, some of the value props. Other things to consider that I like to challenge people. regulatory and compliance issues. Who's looking at you? Who's auditing? Who's asking you, what do you have in place to guarantee if you're getting my business, and this is me, third party, but, hey, look, I just won a contract for $50 million with one of my customers. Well, they're pushing on you to make sure that you don't fall down in the course of servicing that contract. Wow. What do I have to do to maintain and to prove my redundancy, my high availability, my security? Oh, I'm SOC compliant. Again, sometimes we're proven up to win business. So again, regulatory compliance is an issue. Financial services, healthcare, I get defense contractors. Why am I downtown? Compliance, levels. So good examples. But security requirements, physical security, application security, those are big things to look at too. Required service levels. Hey, what kind of ships? What kind of people? What do we need? What kind of eyes on this stuff do we need? Typically, we don't want to staff those people ourselves. We'd rather pay somebody. Usage patterns for workloads. I have a group that has a global, and they watch instead of thinking, oh, they got 1,000 users. Well, but the people are coming off as new people are coming on because they kind of follow the sun. Well, that's an example of looking at a usage pattern. Do I have high volumes? We've got a client that has 10,000 consumers of a report. My bet is they'll run it on the first, second, third of the month. There's no way I can take 10,000 divided by 30 days and say, oh, here's my baseline. And I know what they're going to do. It's going to look like this. So I've got some real challenges on how do I let 10,000 people hit it where they're not all screaming and spinning. Good example, right? Integration with other functions. Where's my stuff? I got my office and exchanges over here, and I've got this, and I've got something over in this data center. This is a big deal. How does it all work together? Okay, so you have to ask those questions. Hosting facility features. Started mentioning this. Power, internet, physical location, physical security. I'm looking for new building for turnkey. Some of the discussion points is, well, how much power can I get? Well, like, how much do you need? I go, well, what do we got? I go, well, what about fiber? And so I'm playing this game with CBRE, and they're like, well, and as you think about power, and most people, we don't really ask that question, how much power can I get to them? Can I get a megawatt? They're like, you need a megawatt? I go, well, I'd like 250 kilowatts, but I'd like to have a megawatt in case things go well. And then we're back to, can I get more than one piece of fiber from just AT&T? How do I get a pair of those? So I'm playing like a geography, a rationalization of even for a facility that I'm looking at building. Why? Even though my stuff's downtown, because I don't want to lose connectivity in the office. I want to make sure I have access. But we ask all these questions about people we're considering hosting them. What have you done? What's it look like? What's the investment? This is important too. You've got to do a spreadsheet. I do. Cost on-premise versus co-location versus hosting. Capital. Do you buy the equipment? Do you depreciate it? Do you lease the equipment? Expensive. Do you rent the equipment? Expensive. Licenses. Do you rent it? Do you lease it? Do you buy it? We've got a lot of companies that buy GP and host GP after they buy it. Why? Well, mathematically, if you take a GP license and you buy it for 5 years to pay software assurance, it's cheaper than if you rent it. So we have a lot of people that are doing a hybrid where they'll host their Cal licensing. We have people that already have GP that are moving into a hosted environment. They don't throw away GP and rent it. They move their license into a hosted situation. They could move co-location. They could move their servers, their GP license. That's another strategy. What are they gaining there? Physical security. They're gaining the power. They're getting the internet. They're getting all those redundancies that they don't want to build in their office. So this is an important exercise to do as you think about hosting. It embodies, again, licensing, IT services, equipment. Again, you got to run it out in 5 years. I have a lot of people that don't do a 5-year horizon on this, but you should use 5 years. A lot of details. I love this one too. Where do you host? This is kind of my funny one. But yeah, we're actually looking across the river. So we're looking to move out of Chesterfield Valley because, believe it or not, on the west side, on the other side of the Missouri River, it's a different fault zone. MasterCard's out there. You look at all the big infrastructure out there. So there is a difference just right over here than being in the red zone. So that's consideration as well as you think about, where are the big data centers? There's a huge one in Kansas City, Caverns. So there's a lot of interesting places where people are putting their resources. So how do you pick? Some more points here. Company, facility, capability, state of service, current need, replacement. Because again, you're looking at where you're at. How do you decide what to do? Do I have a big capital spend coming up? Am I incrementally maintaining servers? Licenses owned. What do you have? Oh, we're on Office 2007. You want to go to 2013? How many people do you have? We talk about Office 365 as a subscription-based approach to leveling out expense and making sure that we always have the latest version. That's one example. Software assurance. You told me it's cheaper to buy GP and pay software assurance than it is to necessarily rent it. So again, I've got a lot of people that do a CapEx on licensing and they do an OpEx on equipment. But again, we need to look at that. In-house IT. What do you want? What do you want for staff? I mean, that's another one of those equations. A lot of people have, I'm not big enough to have an expensive IT guy, the really good people, or cost prohibitive. So that's a big factor too, whether you should do it in-house. Ongoing service requirements, same thing. What's it cost me a month to maintain these things? So again, here we are with this big spreadsheet. Cost. Cost is driving a lot of decision making. We got to get good numbers. Okay. Again, other things, application configuration requirements. There's a lot of stuff you can't do in a public cloud. Microsoft says, hey, we got CRM online. You know what? It's not all things, all people. It's great, simple, it'll do a lot, but it's not going to be all things. We host CRM in our data center. Same price as Microsoft CRM online. Well, why? What's the difference? We can do anything we want in our private data center. Microsoft, you're multi-tenant, you're living in a world with lots of people. You can't knock the wall out. You can't do things like that. Reporting. So there's some constraints based on what you try to do. Oh, I need to do all this integration. You're not going to maybe get all those things either. Availability requirements. What do I need? Hey, I'm running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I have high uptime. We had a client, 25 states. All their data equipment was in their offices here. When we had the power failure, and they were out for a week. I mean, everybody that St. Louis is dead, but the rest of the U.S. was fine, but nobody could work because their stuff was there. What are they going to? Hurry up, let's move it. Let's go move it somewhere. There was a critical, but as you look at this availability in users' physical locations, all of a sudden you're like, this stuff doesn't belong in my building because irregardless of what happens here in St. Louis, it shouldn't affect productivity elsewhere. Again, we talked about integration requirements, compliance, and privacy requirements. So a lot of criteria to work through this exercise. Licensing options, you've heard me allude to this. Client access license. Most people who own GP, that's what you have. You have a client access license, and you pay Microsoft software assurance. Subscriber access licensing. There's no software assurance. You're renting it. In our data center, in our hosting, everything below the application license is a SAL. It's a subscriber license. Windows Data Center, SQL Server, SharePoint, remote desktop services, all subscriber licensing. We don't buy any of it. Guess what? We always get the latest versions. You never have to buy a new version. That's the benefit of a subscriber license. Again, the concept of software as a service, we're renting it. It's a service. I'm buying it. I pay what I use. Okay? Licensing categories. So as we break these down, server, I mentioned Windows Server, SharePoint, RDP, Exchange. I didn't mention Exchange. Application software, ERP, GP, AX, CRM, SQL, and then productivity, we've got Office products. Okay, so there's a lot of different categories within that as well. Okay, so here's an example I did. 25 users, we want to move everything. This would be a rent. This is a complete rent model too. So, but what we find is that they can rent GP. They rent the server, they rent GP. Again, 10 full users, 15 live users, 25 copies of Office 13. We're running a Hyper-V cluster. They actually end up with 3 servers, an Active Directory, a SQL server, and an application server. Again, in the hosting facility, sonic wall, redundant power, 7x24 monitoring and everything. And the way this one actually broke down, it's about $213 per user per month for all of that stuff. And you're like, start doing the math, you start peeling it apart. You're like, okay, what does it really cost to maintain a user per month? But again, we're including all the licensing, all the applications, there's support, monitoring, all those things are happening in there, and you're thinking, all right, is it a lot, is it a little? 25 user install.
Welcome to the audio competency center. Please enter a contact key followed by pound. If you are the leader, please press star now.
But the concept of managed services can go from a little to a lot, okay? And if you think about, are we monitoring servers? Are we monitoring the network? What are we monitoring? We're monitoring disk. Actually, now we're looking at a SQL server. We're making sure it doesn't run out of space and it's got enough RAM. So there's different levels of managed services. But the concept is that you can assign responsibility for a little or for the entire thing where you're outsourcing. There's a lot of companies that have no IT staff, and everything's hosted, and they have some clients. Who's doing that? You have no idea? All right. So again, it's cloud. System maintenance, reboots, backup. So I've never even been, I've been down to the facility. I haven't actually even stood next to the equipment that I own down there. That's how remotely this is all managed. But reboots, backups, server software maintenance, service packs, updates. These are all things you think about should happen all the time. System administration, adding users, domain name services, application software maintenance, service packs, updates, upgrades, application software support, break fix. It goes all the way down to the minutia. And in our agreement, sometimes we include all the GP updates and upgrades. Some people say, really? I'll never have to pay for a GP upgrade? It's built in. There's a component of the monthly fee that accrues so that we can do all the maintenance on the servers. But reboot, service packs, if you think about all this, again, it's a comprehensive and end-to-end strategy is really what you're looking at. And again, it's not for all people, but a lot of organizations, hybrid. Oh, I'm going to start delegating and allocating portions of that rollout. So let's talk about Microsoft real quick. I'm almost out of time here. Everybody heard of Office 365? Where does that software run? Who knows?
It runs on your client.
It runs on your client. Did anybody think that it was only in the cloud? Good. Okay, so there's some people, maybe not in this room, that were shying away from Office 365. It's like, oh, I don't want a cloud version of Office. Well, there is a cloud version of it, but you get a license that installs on your desktop. Does it look like the same license? It looks identical. One's $400, one's $12 or $15 a month. So, Office, Exchange, SharePoint, Link, they have varying degrees of this. But why is this a cloud strategy? How many people have their own Exchange server in their organizations? Okay, who supports the Exchange server? You do it yourself? Okay, so there's a perfect example where, why do I do that? I am not an Exchange shop, and why am I maintaining my own Exchange server, and why do I have to hire an Exchange guy to work for my company? But, at the end of the day, just hosting Exchange, you've got a server, you've got licensing, you're going to buy more licensing, you're going to have to pay somebody to deal with that because it's complex and you can't do it yourself. This is a great example where, let's get mail out of the building. And I'm telling you that it is a very, very well adopted and accepted approach because where's your Exchange server under this scenario? Somewhere. It's in a public cloud. Yeah, Bruce.
Just to put some condiment on what you just said, I review the bandwidth usage report for our T1 of internet that comes in from AT&T on a weekly basis, and over 80% of the bandwidth that we use is for SMTP traffic, which is Exchange, which is mail. 80%. So everybody gets less performance browsing the web, less performance uploading checks to the bank, scan them and upload them. Everything is slower because we have an Exchange server.
And so, not that I'm picking on that, and there's a lot of people that want to run it, and it's control. Oh, we need to control it, we need to have it. Why? Just ask the question. But as you look at cost to maintain, cost to service, cost to license, and as you go do a comparison there, rationalize the numbers. Mail's an easy one to get out of the organization. And you say, well, put it in Microsoft's public cloud. Now, in our world, if we're doing a Link project for a customer, we'll end up hosting Exchange with Link in our data center. That is the only situation where I'll host Exchange for anybody. It's got to be next to Link, and that's because to get the real tight enterprise voice and Link, they need to be together. But otherwise, I don't want to host Exchange. They do a great job of it. Put it over there, okay? But I have customers that have part in my data center, part locally, and have their Office 365. And this is a great example of taking one aspect and moving it out the door. Okay, and as you look at the features, you look at the cost, I think that people will be surprised. So that's just, again, demystifying what about Office 365. Over the haul, it really does work out the same. If you're doing, you can do Office 365 under an enterprise agreement. You can go click, click, click and sign up online, varying levels. But at the end of the day, this is a great strategy, and it's working very, very well. And we don't do much with that. We can help with migrations, but there's a lot of people that are really planted in that space. Who knows what Azure is? Does anybody, who's heard of it? Okay, I know there's a couple of big shots. But if you had to explain, what is Azure? How do you describe it to someone? I'm going to tell this audience, what is Azure? Well, and I grabbed, a couple of bullet points where you think about what that is. What is it? I'm running equipment. It's equipment in the sky. It's a really easy way to put it. Microsoft has built out, and again, these data centers, these million-square-foot modular data centers, they have so much capacity. So I can go click, 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 and I can say, I need a Windows SQL Server with 8 gig of RAM, and, that's $430 a month. And then I need another Windows Server, and that's another $300 a month. And then I need some virtual workstations, click, click, click. Okay, here we go, pay per month. And what I've done is I've provisioned servers in the cloud. I don't have to buy anything. I don't have to install anything locally, but all of a sudden I get machines configured for me in Microsoft's public cloud, which what? Hey, I'm going to start moving stuff up there. So it's not the same. Are we hosting? Yes. Why? Because you're putting your stuff on somebody else's equipment. It's not co-location, but you're not buying the capital. So why is this attractive? Okay, well, here we go, back to those big value props. It's huge. It's public. It's redundant. Nobody can steal it. It should be impervious to everything because they've got so many billions of dollars invested. But at the end of the day, you got a price per month, and everybody says, I could buy that server and put it in my office and do it cheaper. Maybe. Maybe you're not doing your math correctly. But again, demystifying what is Azure, again, Turnkey Private Cloud. We'll host ERP. We'll host Dynamics products. Chris, I want you to host this Linux thing. Go to Azure. Azure will spin up a Linux box. You can put your Linux server up in Azure, and you're done. Hey, I need to build something else. This is a great avenue. Why? I don't have to buy anything. I don't have to get equipment. I don't have to get my IT guys to configure it. But, learning about this and understanding this is an option. Again, it's a hybrid strategy. It's an option. Okay? My comment, every piece of Microsoft software is being developed for the cloud. Very common. Microsoft Private Cloud, Windows System Center. Does everybody know what that is? It's technology that monitors. It's technology that does work for us. So they've gotten so smart as they figured out what people do, and now we've got tools to do it more efficiently than people. System Center is a very, very, very powerful component as part of the data center. Again, this last one, something I've used before, eliminating IT from the emphasis. Focus on business processes, not technical detail. A lot of decision makers don't want to be caught in the minutia of disks, RAM, servers, replication. Do we have a generator? Do we have 2 internet pipes? What's my IT budget supposed to be? Let's focus on what we do. Back to that core competency comment. So, and this is just, I grabbed this off their site. Never wait for servers or infrastructure again. Virtual machines, remote apps, cloud services, virtual networks, express route. They'll do dedicated fiber between your office and there. Traffic manager. Again, anybody wants to check out Azure, like I said, but as we're thinking about this big strategy, I think that's my last one. And so mine, private cloud, co-location St. Louis, dedicated. We're doing dedicated single instance. We're not doing any multi-tenant stuff today, meaning everybody's private. Nobody shares a server in our world. We do remote domains. We're covering GP 2013 CRM, 2013 AX 2012, Link, 2013 Exchange 2013. We've got doc management up there, SharePoint web hosting, term services. Our goal, physical security, high availability, empathy for clients, model configuration. I live there. If I'm selling you a place in the condominium complex, I'm your neighbor. So that's a good testament because the strategy really does work. My closing comments, again, as you think about everything I've said, there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of learning. And as you look at, do we need to look at this? The hybrid strategy, what that means, I can do a little of this and a little of this. What makes the most sense for you? Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? Where do you want to staff? Where do you want to spend money on capital and maintain an asset versus rent it, outsourcing it? There's a lot of momentum behind the concepts of outsourcing into hosting strategy. So hopefully this was informative, gives you a lot to think about, anything that we can do to help. Like I said, pointing, hey, if you're missing some numbers here as you look at really trying to compare costs and figure out what should I do. Again, there's a lot of different ways to experience this technology. Ask. Show me. Show me what it looks like. Show me what it feels like. TP 2013 R2 with a web client. Remote desktop. Not everybody likes to do remote desktop to get to servers. Web client. All of a sudden, who cares, right? It's open. It's a browser. It feels a lot different. So that's a big help also. But anyway, thank you. Hopefully, any questions? I got